This song, however, is just like pure sound collage. It's called Giant Carnivorous Robot Ascends from the Deep to Consume the Unsuspecting People of Tokyo. So it's like directly mecha inspired. Kind of just like a weird little bit of fantasy at the end of the record. But I thought it would be a good thing to show people because there's a lot of like very weird techniques that I think people could be using in Ableton a lot to sort of like exploit sound creation and achieve new things and kind of like break out of the typical cycles of arranging things on a grid and doing everything by hand. As great as that is and as much control as that gives you, sometimes you just want to jam. And I'm going to turn off my incidental music. Hope you thought it was good. And switch over here to my other camera. Hello, I'm down in this corner now. Thought it would be better because now you can read the tooltips here. There's usually not very much happening in the lower right hand side of Ableton. So this is the project here. I'll just turn all the automation off. I've deleted a couple of tracks that were just kind of like empty or routed, you know, like weren't necessary to explain to you what was going on. It's very noisy, doesn't really have any particular structure to it, sort of like a two-part structure where the robot's coming up and then a second part where the robot attacks. I could have built a lot more drama into it, but it was just more of like a proof of concept. In the original iteration of it, here, let me pull the file up. The original iteration of it was very long. It was called The Diadem of Violent Glee. It was 31 minutes of just noises and sound collage, developed from what I call the Chaos Rack, which is sort of a method within Ableton Live to achieve sample-based chaos algorithmically, more or less aleatorically, I guess is probably the better word to use. And I'm going to run through how to create a chaos rack yourself before I even dive into what this track sounds like. We're just going to do it in a new MIDI lane here, and I'm going to build it from scratch. I thought that would be a good thing to do. It's a combination of a couple of different methods, some things that you can actually do more or less within Ableton Live 10, or excuse me, Ableton Live 11 natively, and 10 as well, though 11's a little bit easier to do it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do, pardon me, we're going to make a device called Drum Pulse. And what that is a combination of drum rack and impulse. So what we do is we'll drag a drum rack onto the track, and then we'll drag impulse into one of these drum rack things here. And what happens is when you hit it, it just hits this first C here. And impulse works on, these are basically all white keys. Impulse is basically just sort of like a way to trigger samples. Usually like a drum, usually like drums, like sort of a traditional drum sampler would be. And then what we're going to do is we are going to come over here to the MIDI effects, and we're going to choose the random. And we are also going to choose the scale effect, which I didn't grab there. And pardon me if I mess up, I'm doing this all just like off the cuff. Don't have a script or anything in front of me. So it could be bad. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually set these sort of like this. And what this says is that these steps here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, correspond to the first 4 white keys. And so if I set the random to have an equal chance of hitting any of, I believe it's 8 notes, 9 notes. I can't remember if it's summed. Oh, it is added. So I think it's just 8. That means that every time I hit this button, it has a chance of hitting one of these. Oh, no. Pardon, it's just 7. Because it would add it. It has a chance of adding it onto the other one. And then I guess if we want the chance to be equal, we would actually divide it across 8 different equal choices. So it would be 100 divided by 8. So we'd actually want to remove... Oh, I'm an idiot. It's 25%. Oh no, actually I'm totally right first time. Because the first one would just be the basic note. So it'd be like that. There we go. Sorry, bad math. I'm very bad at explaining things sometimes. But basically what this does is every time you hit this button, it has an equal chance now of hitting any of these 8 options here, which then in turn trigger one of these 4 samples. Now what you could do is you could basically change this to you could either like take this and make it all like up the scale and kind of like make it like 1 per, and then you could have like 8 different ones. Basically like the same thing, and you could just leave this random module as is and just kind of like change the scale as you want it. But now you have something that just like randomly chooses a sample. And now the most basic way to use drum pulse is to like maybe choose a drum hit that you like. Like let's just go into my preferred samples here. Let's go into my new sample pack coming soon. TM #add. And we'll just like pick a sample that we like. Maybe that one. That's a kick. Actually, you know what? I want to demonstrate with the snare this time, I think. Hey! Nice to see you. Do I have the chat up? Oh, it's working. Good. I'm trying to find one that would be like... let's use that one. And what I do is if you want all of these to be sort of just slightly different from one another, you can make a drum rack that more or less like has very lively sounding, like almost like it's a real hit. Like things will be slightly different from one another. So the traditional way to use like drum pulse, traditional in my book, is to come in here and just like change things ever so slightly. So maybe like take your velocity down. It's up to you. I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. I don't even have my keyboard on. Maybe take and transpose these up and down a little bit. Maybe leave that on that. Maybe change like the random transposition a little bit on all of these. Could change the pan, maybe change the start time so you get like a little bit different. Maybe change like the stretch on one of them. And then when you hit this button, don't really like the stretch, but you can see that it's different every time. So let's, make that a snare. And we can do the same thing for a kick. What I'm just going to do is I'm just going to control and drag to copy it over. And I'm basically just going to replace these samples. Just like that. Drag them in. Since you're just replacing samples, Impulse is just interpreting this as a sample swap, so all of your settings stay. If you want the decay to like continue on, like you have long samples, like I do later in this project file, as you'll see, you can just like change the decay on all of them. And what you're going to get is then a drum rack that every time you hit it, oops, gotta go down. Things are slightly different. Awesome. So the other way that you can use it, you can probably, in your mind, you're probably getting ideas about how you can abuse this in the first place. So like, my suggestion then is to start dragging in random sounds or different sounds or sounds that you categorize in a certain way, and you'll find that maybe you get more interesting results. And that can just become like a part of your drum rack. And you're already getting like what sounds like nearly organic results. Now, say you did this on a bunch of different tracks. And let's do it on a number of different tracks, actually. Let's just drag in random sounds. Literally not even going to look at what these are. Just make sure that they're all different. What I'm also going to do is I'm also going to turn the decay up on these. And this is where the chaos component comes into chaos rack. You start to see how you might start constructing sound collage in a controlled, chaotic fashion. I'm just going to start dragging these in because the next thing that I'm going to do... Oops, we can leave two of them the same, that's alright. Can live with that. The next thing I'm going to do is start sequencing them in a way that's also aleatoric. So now we've got a very noisy rack full of stuff. And now what I'm going to do is use one of my favorite tools. This is something that comes with Ableton Live Suite. However, there are a lot of other tools to sort of like randomly sequence MIDI notes. You can use any one that you prefer to do this. For the moment, I'm going to use something from Ableton Live's probability pack, and it's their step divider. And now what this does is, as you can see, it's sort of, it's a sequencer, more or less. And when I punch these in, you'll notice I'm now sequencing all the crazy sounds. And since I can adjust the rate at any time, or I can go in and I can subdivide these by holding down Shift. I get like slightly finer control over it. That is literally the basis for this entire track, the entire sound collage. You're going to see iterations of this rack appear more or less in the same way, with more or less like the same settings. What's going to sort of change is how they're processed in order to sort of like create a sonic soundscape. One that's not super detailed, at least as far as my mind goes, in sort of like setting a location and that kind of thing. But it's like really interesting, I think, to listen to, and kind of a cool proof of concept. Like I think people, Ableton makes something like this extremely easy to do, like easy to just stumble across as well. And you can see how, you know, you don't even have to stop here. You could like put drum racks inside other drum racks and take, you know, your impulse sounds and reprocess them and stuff like that. With impulse as well, you get like the option to control the overall like stretching of a sound. So like I can turn up the time on all of the samples and get these really weird stretch things, as well as pitch them. It's like you're already inventing new things, just by turning a couple knobs. In a couple of different parts of this set, I've actually taken like this time on all of these like impulse racks and mapped them to a global macro, so that I can sort of change the pace and the sound of everything at certain times. But yeah, that's the general idea. So, you know, I really don't even have that much more to say on it, to be honest. I think we'll just see specific instances as we get into it. That is the drum pulse tutorial. I hope it was good. I'm bad at explaining things. If you have any questions, you can always hit me up on Twitter or in my Discord, which is probably here on Twitch. If it's not now, it will be by the time the VOD goes up, I promise. God, my lips are so red. I turned up the saturation. I look so good. Actually, you can probably see more now. It's not a good thing. Anyway, drum pulse. All done. Let's get into the actual track itself. Some of those sounds were actually used in the track, so you'll hear some of that. But here's what it sounds like. You'll notice in the upper left-hand corner that it starts out with the tempo slowed down. And that's because this stuff here is actually like being rendered in the intro and is being time stretched a little bit. I'm gonna skip through a little bit because it is like an almost 8-minute long sound collage. You can see that I've let Ableton time stretch by transients here for maximum glitch effect. Now what you're hearing is a couple of layers of sounds. This main rack, and then a rack that has more processing underneath it. Probably has the most processing of anything on this track, actually. So you're starting to hear bits of these live racks come in. Okay, so the collage continues like that for a little while, sort of like molding. You're going to hear various layers come in. But as you can see, the collage kind of more or less goes for a while. What I'm doing is I'm manipulating these racks, both of which are triggering various layers here on this rack. And that's mostly what you're hearing, what's being rendered out here. These come from the original 30-minute jam that I did. So as we go on, it sort of like progresses, the speed picks up, the density picks up. I kind of kept some interesting bits in there. It starts to slow down around here. And when it picks back up, it gains a few more different racks, including some gun sounds. Some trash sounds, which are like various debris and stuff like that. And some people screaming. that continues for a while, and the song kind of ends. With a bit of debris. And just like, you know, the sounds of nature kind of continuing. Originally I wanted to do this in a video game engine, actually. But decided that for now I thought it was more practical to do this. And eventually I would record this. So I knew it would be good in that sense. Okay. Let's break down these racks kind of one by one. The step dividers, as you can see, are set to like all different rates and different sort of divisions. There's still divisions more or less of 4, but as time goes on, I'll just play this rack for you. They get more and more out of sync with each other. Oh, I should play it where it's going fast. And now for this one, I've actually labeled. I've actually gone down here and I've actually like labeled what all of them are. So these are more like bassy kick sounds. It is kind of a snare. These like scrapes and stuff. These are sounds pilfered from like video game sounds, royalty-free packs, my own like creations, things like that. You saw I had some like Richard Devine packs that I bought a little while back, stuff like that. And all of these are being played. You see, like they're just like the other ones. The chances and the choices are a little bit different. I kind of wanted the chaos, a little bit of like randomness, so I didn't necessarily pay too much attention on doing it all mathematically perfectly. There are points where I have this beat repeat on, and these are affecting like a slight amount of chance at parts, different parts of the song. I don't think they were actually used on the recording of the original rack here, but they are used elsewhere. And then what I did is I did like a lot of really, really heavy multi-band compression to make some of these really quieter sounds and these transients come forward. And most of that is just like a lot of like mid-range reduction, and like kind of keeping the bass coming through and booming to make it sound muddy and aggressive. There is a little bit of Bill Putnam echo on this, I guess. 3%. I think that's just like a really long IR, if I remember right. Does it say how long it is? 4 seconds. Alright. I guess it's just like providing some sort of like upper mid width, more or less. And then a saturator that's doing a little bit of sine folding on anything that goes above 0, more or less. Nothing too crazy, but you know, if sounds start piling on each other, then they're gonna create a little bit of distortion. Nice little bit of like thickening for that, and that's what became this render down here, this orange render. I think I color coded these correctly. Yeah. Also down here is what I call the scrape rack, which is probably the best rack here. So this includes like a little bit of velocity randomness. But oh, okay, sorry, I'm totally mistaken. I got distracted. This is not a rack. I named it improperly. This is actually a sampler. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking a recording of these jams, and every note, this is played in by hand here. Every note chorus will basically move the sampler, the offset of the sample, through. I hope I'm explaining this correctly. I may have to restart. If you turn the scale down here to 0, what that does is like all of every note that you hit essentially plays the same note. Okay? And then what you can do is you can set the key on your keyboard to instead trigger where the sample starts. And that's what I've done. And I've also set it to actually like change the pitch. So as you go down, it gets a little bit lower, and as you go up, it gets a little bit higher. Because this is like, I don't even know, like a 30-minute like jam of these sounds. And then what I've done is over time, I'm oscillating. Don't know if I've done anything else here really. I think this is all stuff down here. I'm oscillating a lot of these different parameters. So this is the coarse pitch of the entire thing. This is the coarse volume of the... Oh, I'm sorry. This is the oscillator pitch. So there's a little bit of a sine wave noise, like oscillation happening on top of the sample. This is the volume of that oscillation. OE release, I guess is that, this is this. It's the oscillator release. And then these are oscillating the voice attack time, the voice release time. And basically like, there's a lot of things that are creating slight changes in like how the sampler works over time. Kind of like moving in and out. So what that sounds like... Hold on. I'm going to turn off some of these effects down here. My apologies. Because there is more, believe it or not. The release time is changing how long these sounds hold on for. But what you're hearing is you're hearing the sampler sort of move as I play different pitches. And the lower I go, the lower in pitch it goes as well. Which is something that can be controlled if I wanted to, which is why I changed it here instead of setting it on the scale here. And so what you're hearing is you're hearing like these different sounds being sort of like run through the sampler and coming back through. Okay. It's interesting. It's basically like made up of other sounds from other bits of this jam. But then what I do is I actually sort of like stretch it a little bit with Molecular's trails here. Which helps add to its sort of like weird amorphous sound. And then these beat repeats have a 1% chance of every now and then capturing a little bit of audio and looping it up. And so it just sort of like devolves into this sort of like soup of sound sitting in the background, which is perfect. And then I rendered that out, essentially. Somewhat interesting in its own right, even if nothing really happens. So all of that makes up the intro, as well as the beginning of some of these robot sounds. Now, if I remember right, I didn't always rename my drum pads correctly, so you'll have to excuse that. But these contain even more sounds that are kind of more like transformer-y robot sounds and screeches and metallic stuff. Some small effects sit up on top. Actual transformer sounds. I believe at this time, let me turn the automation back on. Yeah, at this point in the track, there's a little bit more automation on the reverb. If I come down here, there'll be less. Yeah, those aren't bass, those are gunshots. But I think that they're basically just copied from this other gun rack, so they're not being triggered. Here's the robot voices. Now, because we've already gone over the chaos rack and stuff, I don't necessarily want to deal with that. But I do want to note that this rack, there are things that have the global time macro on it. So I think the voice is one of them. Should come back to that, actually. It's pretty cool. The voice one specifically has some extra bits on it because I needed it to be a little bit more like transformer-y than it was. I added a vocoder on it, which is adding a lot of that like modulator sound tone to it. And then I gave it a big old bass boost and added some compression to kind of make the voice kind of sound like it's booming. I'm gonna like resample that because it does kind of sound pretty cool. More reverb on it, more distortion on it, even more than the other ones. Creatively, sort of like combining distortion and mixing is something that I really like to do, and on these big sound collage pieces, it kind of pays off. I have to state again, this is something that was never really intended for an album, and then I couldn't get it off my mind, and so it ended up developing into this to a point where I thought people might find it entertaining. This is the robot rack. I gotta take this return chain I think appears somewhere else, but not here. Is it maybe on the gun rack? I don't know. I could be wrong. So yeah, the gun rack obviously has gun sounds on it. I don't think these are named correctly. I think it's just I don't know which ones are being triggered, to be honest with you. You don't even have to make music with these. They're just like insanely fun by themselves. Like if you just download like a pack of gun sounds and just like run it through and just mash the button, it's honestly a lot of fun. Like you don't have to do anything with it. Like it's like just cathartic, honestly. You'll notice the volume juxtaposition is a little bit different in some of these. That's something that I also did for the collage. So, you know, when like copying over all of these different, you know, impulse racks and stuff, the sound tends to just be like sometimes a little bit like stock, like you've kept all your sounds all the same. So what I did is I made some things a little bit louder, some things a little bit closer. To be honest, there's probably some things in here that I'm missing where there's like a little bit extra reverb to make something sound far away. It was just kind of like partially randomness, like just trying to induce the system, which is all of these cascading different samplers, to make something interesting, or like to induce enough chance for something interesting to happen. And there is still a level of randomness. So like some of these things are not entirely rendered out. Like the scream rack is not entirely rendered out. The trash rack is not entirely rendered out. And the robot rack is not. So I had to render this multiple times. So like there's an element of chance in every render, and I chose one for the album. Which is always cool to do, because some people don't like to do that. Sometimes I don't like to do that. Depends on how much chance there is. But I think overall it sounds pretty cool, pretty much no matter what comes out the other end. It's sort of a matter of timing, preference. I think I've covered this all right. I mean, iterations of the same thing, more or less. You'll note, I guess I should note this here. This is on the gun rack. You might see this in other bits of the file. But these sounds of the buildings falling. Here, I'll play one of these for you. Those sidechain other things. So like the buildings coming down is supposed to be like overwhelmingly loud, happening really like around you and close to you. And I thought that maybe other things should come down in the mix when the buildings are falling. And the gun rack is one of the things it does. I think probably all of them do, to be honest. The robot rack does. The renders probably do. Oh no, they don't happen at the same time, so they wouldn't happen. Alright, let's see here. What else have we got? The trash rack is essentially, I think, just a lot of small... They don't sound small with all the compression that I have. Like, these are supposed to be very quiet dust sounds. And they're all just going to be driven up. Here, maybe that'll help. Sounds of debris and stuff. There's a lot of places to get these kind of sounds too. Hell, you can even just pirate them. In Minecraft. But the trash rack is not really anything special. It's just a little bit of extra sound. Same sort of echo, same sort of saturation, I'm fairly sure. Yeah, it's more or less copy and pasted. The screams are just on this one impulse bit. I think it's like the same samples, like 2 or 3 different samples. They come from like a fight, but it's... I think you can kind of get it across. I tried recording some of my own, but I live in an apartment, and I was like... I didn't really want to be doing that all day. Thought maybe that might set up some red flags. So the screams come in from time to time. I believe it's a little bit messed up. I think... Yeah, it's, you see how these say MIDI Chaos Rack 1.1 freeze? These are triggered from the audio of this. I think you can kind of tell. Like there's a hit here, there's a hit here. Might not even be the same sample, but I think it is. More or less, like every time that there's like a some like loud sounds happening in the track, there is a chance that somebody will scream or some trash will fall. It's kind of what that leads to. Again, it's very messy. The whole point was to be messy. You know, if I wanted things to be proper, I would just like arrange this by hand. So it's sort of a proof of concept for how to create new compositions in Ableton. Let's see what else I've got. Buildings falling. We have some, you know, this is nature sounds here. You literally can't even hear it. That's how quiet it is. Just kind of in the back. I just wanted the realism. As a filmmaker, there's something called room tone. When parts are quiet, it's not actually quiet. It's not like dead quiet. There's just like the ambient tone of the room, and that's kind of what that is kind of underneath it. I didn't really have any good like just city sounds that really fit what I was doing, so I just stuck with like outdoors. Not great, not perfect, but So both of these tracks here, these big ones, also have processing on them. So like not only within some of these racks are the sounds being like extremely driven up and compressed, but then there's even more compression happening on it. I often use this this plugin called Vitamin from Waves to sort of like shape how things sound, and you know, so like I think on both of these bits. Yeah, on both of these bits, I'm kind of increasing. I'm kind of like giving some excitation and some width to the highs and lows. And let's see what else. A little more distortion. I noticed that these were down here. These two polygon tracks were here. This is from a company called Glitch Machines that makes like a lot of weird stuff. I don't honestly know if any of these were used because they don't have any MIDI on them, so I don't remember if it needs a sampler or whatever. But I am gonna note that there may be some polygon stuff in here. But probably not. It sounds like there's not. I don't know. It's a very busy track. So we've got all that. We've got all that. The building's falling occasionally, like, triggers the sidechain for all of these things. And yeah, there's a few incidental sounds. So like, I couldn't really get it to like trigger the sound of like the invasion or whatever starting. So I had to use this. Just pick this weird like Autobot sounding thing. I mean, literally, like I just like looked up Autobot, and there's, you know, you could probably make that out of like a riser or something like that. But that's one of the incidental sounds that was added in, and then, you know, obviously this sort of stuff, and then this very last dust sound. Couldn't really get it to sort of like come in correctly, so I added one. It's just like a little bit at the end. Fairly sure that's it. I'm fairly sure that covers it. On the master, there was just like some isotope, just some normal dynamics and mastering and stuff like that, or some limitation, that is. Limiting. Nothing too complex. Let's see here. What did we automate? This is the amount. Okay. So at the end here, this whole group. Compression increase. Kind of makes sense. It's louder, you know. It's supposed to be more going on, so anything that would be, you know, much quieter, like the dust falling and stuff like that, is going to be much more in your face. That makes sense, because all of this stuff is, all of this stuff down here is like has already been like this has its own compression that we don't need to worry about, and all of this like robot stuff in the beginning also has a layer of compression, so it just needs to be louder down here. And I've loosened up, it looks like, on some of the attack times. Probably should just not have attack times that long for the bass, but whatever. The muddiness and everything kind of adds to the feel of the track. I must say, like the Chaos rack is really like the ideal way to do some like sample bass sound generation. And I've done other methods. I've shown taking samples and then cutting them up. So like, you know, you could record, you know, like I've done here, you know, a number of just samples into your timeline, and then if you can chop this up and you could right click and slice it to a new MIDI track, and then what you get is you get those sounds in time sliced into a drum rack, more or less, and you can then play those samples. So like the cycle continues. You can just recycle your sounds and recycle your sounds until they sound more and more mechanical and more messed up. You know, what I've done here with the transients and you know, these sounds stretch out, can resample that. And you can use the same like chaos rack technique, where you've got these step dividers, or any step divider, or even just MIDI triggering your sampler. And I think Ableton has a lot of opportunity, a lot of open opportunity for like new sound ideas, sound generation, things like that.